Welcome to the Anchor Your Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Barbara Gulin, giggling my way through this Friday before a holiday weekend, even though y'all will hear this next week, with my co-host, Tony Shore. How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing great. We were laughing as we went into the show today because I said, what's the title of our show today? And Barb, you said Women and Financial Independence. And I said, two things I know nothing about. So I'm glad you're the expert. You're the expert in both of these fields. So this is my chance to learn, right?
I will not tell your wife we had this conversation. Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully she won't watch this. So, okay. Yeah.
And, first of all, Monday is Memorial Day, and we would be remiss not to acknowledge those who gave all so that we could have it all.
And so many people have, Barb, given their lives for our country. And it's, it's almost sad that we just have one day where we focus on that. It should be, it should be always ongoing, of course. But this is the day we really focus on remembering those who have given their lives for our country. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not about picnics and fireworks. This is about, we have the freedom to have those picnics and fireworks because of the sacrifices that they made.
Yeah.
I will say in the last few years, I am relieved that so many Vietnam veterans are getting the recognition that they did not get.
Yes, finally.
Yes. I had an uncle who was killed in Vietnam. He was a pilot who was shot down on a training mission. And my aunt never had him declared dead. I was not even a twinkle in my parents' eye yet when that happened. And I was 5 years old when they recovered his remains. And I remember going to his funeral.
Wow.
So
they did recover his remains.
They did recover his remains.
Yeah, that's amazing because that didn't always happen.
No,
a lot of MIA out there. Yeah.
Well, and it was because he was in a plane crash, and so
yeah,
got it. Not fully exposed to the jungle there.
Sure,
but it was it's something that always gives me pause. My sister's husband's family have always made a point of going around. They will come down they don't live in Kansas City, but they will come to the Kansas City area this weekend, and they go around to all of the different cemeteries where family is buried, and they decorate all the graves.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So, even though people are going to be hearing this a week later, I hope that you took time to reflect and to be grateful for the things that we have, because some people have literally given their lives for us to have this freedom.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. And of course, this will be a week after Memorial Day, but we're recording this right before Memorial Day weekend. And so it's good that you remembered that and mentioned that so we can remember others is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that is, I know a lot of people out there, a lot of our listeners and viewers probably have family that gave their lives in wars like yourself. You have family members that passed in Vietnam, and Vietnam is a tough one. Vietnam and Korea, and I'm glad there's been attention brought to the other problems. I don't have any within my immediate family. I don't know of any that died in war, but I do have a lot of family that served and family that served in wars. And I do have one of my mom's cousins came back not well. He's not alive anymore, and really the reason he eventually died and I think took his own life was just because the war messed him up in Vietnam. It was Vietnam. Yeah.
The wars mess a lot of people up.
Yeah, it's hard.
Post-traumatic stress is a thing, In fact,
it is.
My dad was a social worker for the VA and actually helped make post-traumatic stress a diagnosable event. So,
wow, really? That's amazing.
Yep. He used to check out, he was treating Vietnam vets at the time. And that's when we moved. I was born in Chicago, and we moved. The VA hospitals for the people who are having problems like that are located in very sparsely populated areas.
Right.
And so, we went from Chicago, Illinois to Sheridan, Wyoming. which was
Oh,
the
wow.
county.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the county seat, so it had 11,000 people in it. But
Right. Right.
we lived in a smaller town, Dayton, where there were like 200 people, or that's what it said the population was on the sign outside town. And
Yeah.
I was like, Mom, shouldn't they make that 204 now since we moved here? Yes, I was that kind of a kid. But my dad, my
And
dad
go out
used
there
to
with a
check out.
Sharpie and fix it, you know?
If only I had been tall enough. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, But my dad would check out 4 or 5 guys out on an evening pass on a Friday night, and we would go out to a restaurant and just go out to dinner. Or when we finally moved closer to Sheridan, we had 8 acres on a
Wow.
hill, and
Wow.
we would have sledding parties. And, he
That's
was
fun.
just teaching them how to reintegrate back into society and to dance with the demons in their head,
Yeah.
from everything that happened. So I have a special place in my heart for Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
Literally grew up around them.
Yeah.
And, they are finally getting the recognition that they deserve,
That's
which
great. Yeah. Fine. Well, it's great that they are finally getting
Mhm,
recognition, but not
mhm.
so great that it's, it's
It's sad that
taken.
it took us this long.
Yeah, the Vietnam War was a mess in so many ways. And yeah, just the way they were treated when they came back and the misunderstanding about it and the fact that maybe we shouldn't have been there. So people here were mad, but they misplaced blame, taking it out on people who were in the military trying to serve. And then they came back and had to deal with the stress, the PTSD, and America not,
Mhm.
supporting
Well, and
anything
it
about what
was
they were
the
doing.
first war where it showed up in the nightly news,
Yes. Yeah.
where you had, you know, by then we had the cameras and the
Yep.
ability,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah, that
you
wasn't
could
happening with the world wars.
no,
That's a big
no.
difference right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, we are way off topic.
Yeah, we got to
Yet
talk about women,
really
and I need you to tell us about women and financial independence so I can learn something today.
well, and we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about, like I was mentioning, the Fed Reserve earlier this week released their survey of household economics and decision making, and that's an annual report that they do. They've done it since at least 2013, and it talks about various things like, if you had a $400 emergency, could you pay for it in cash or would you need to use a credit card?
Mm,
Guess what the percentage is that can actually do that overall?
what?
Um,
What was
make
that?
that $400,
Oh,
cover
yeah.
that $400 emergency with
Yeah, so
cash.
how
What
many
percentage of adults do you think it is?
what percentage could cover a $400 debt in cash rather than
Mm-hmm.
putting it on a credit card?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would say 80%.
You are such an optimist. That's what I love about you. 63% of all adults, just
Oh,
63%,
oh
say
my
that they could
gosh. So it's
cover a
not that far over
$400
half.
emergency expense using cash or its equivalent.
Oh my gosh. It's like 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 bill right now.
Right. And 56% of Americans do not have a three months worth of emergency savings
Yeah.
anywhere.
That I believe even more, but
Mhm.
yeah, I've known that one. That stat has been out there and people always talk about that you need 3 to 6 months of living
Mhm.
expenses in an emergency fund at
Mhm.
your bank are easily accessible. And I know you've said that on the show and said that to me many times, Barb, but so many people don't, and they think that's unattainable. But I can tell you it is. I thought it was unattainable. And,
Mhm.
even when I wasn't making so much money, if you just force yourself to put a little bit away, and people say, well, I don't have any put away. You do. You just have to make
You
adjustments.
just have to, like, go to Starbucks twice a week instead of
Yeah,
every day.
it's discipline, and
Mhm.
I've always been I have a serious lack of discipline when it comes to finances, so that some of us have to work on it harder than others, right?
Yeah, well, and Michael Hyatt has this phrase. He says, "That which gets inspected gets done." So
Yes. Yep.
when you pay attention to what's going on, and when you look at that, and when you keep an eye on it, that's, your attention goes where you focus. If I tell you to try not to think about a pink elephant, what just popped in your head?
A pink elephant. Right.
Okay. And the interesting part about this survey is that even though they collect the gender of the person that is taking the survey, they do not report any of the findings broken down by gender. They break
That's
them down by
crazy.
whether or not you have kids in the home. They break them down ethnically.
But the
They break
survey
them down
asked
by
if you're
age.
male or
But they
female,
ask if you're
so
male
they
or
could break
female.
it down that
They
way. They
could.
just didn't.
They could.
That's weird.
So, once again, one of the things that you and I have touched on an awful lot is that the financial world gears itself toward men, and that tide is starting
True.
to change. For all of the investment advisors that are out there in the United States, for every one that's a woman, there's 4 out there that are a man. So, maybe 3 that are a man, but there's only somewhere between 20 and 25% of us in the industry that are women.
Wow.
And yet 94% of women, according to a Bank of America survey, are going to be in charge of all of the finances at some point.
Yeah, because they outlive the men.
They outlive the men, but they also tend to just take the lead.
Yeah.
Even with the day-to-day and managing things. I had
Right.
A client in the office yesterday. Her husband passed away a month ago. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm not going to cry." And I said, "Sweetie, you got to cry. You got to feel the feelings." And she ended up crying on my shoulder for a little while, which is fine. That's a day in the life of a financial planner. And, but as she was sitting there crying on my shoulder and letting me hug her, she's like, "If it would have been me, so-and-so, my husband, would have been asking my daughters all the time what to do because he doesn't know how to do any of this."
Oh.
There's a large population of women out there that are in the same boat, but they don't talk to each other about it. And it's like this, it is, I hate to use the phrase silent majority because that brings up so many other different connotations.
Sure.
But there are so many women out there that are in the same position. And, 47% of women feel confident that they understand how to invest and that they'd be capable of investing, but only 28% actually pull the trigger and do it for themselves because this whole concept has been redirected to be a quote unquote man's world. When in reality, this is a human thing. Financial stability doesn't pick gender. And the survey is frustrating because I think that if they were to break it down by sex, we'd get a much more accurate picture other than just that headline of the wage gap that men make 16 cents more. Women make 84 cents to every dollar a man makes.
Yeah.
So,
it's not good. I mean, and it's just been that way. And, things may have improved a bit here and there. And people think, oh, yeah, that's no longer a problem. We're all equal now. But it's really not the case, is it?
I mean, my generation is the first generation that did not need their husband's permission to go to the bank and get a credit card.
That's crazy.
When my mom and dad got married, my mom would have needed my dad's permission.
That's nuts. That's crazy.
For those of you that can't see the video, I just kind of cocked my head and gave Tony a look. But
yeah. Right. And I've gotten that look before.
You have, me, but it's not directed toward you. It's the concept of the whole conversation, and that
it is frustrating because what you're saying is, I mean, almost at every turn, women have disadvantages, or I don't know if that's the right word, hurdles that men don't always have, or the hurdle is higher. They have to jump higher to achieve the same things, and they're often left on their own with the finances.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. At some point, we're all going to have to handle the bills on our own. Yet, believe it or not, 84% of men are able to pay their bills on time. Only 79% of women can.
Huh.
The wage gap, women are more likely to have to use credit cards to make ends meet. And women, particularly women of color and women in the service industry, are more likely to make less than $15 an hour than a man.
Yeah.
So,
and the answer, one of the answers is, you mentioned something that really struck me earlier, Barb, about this is talk to each other. Women should, and I know you've been trying to do this. You do conferences on women in finance. You work with other female financial advisors to try to educate women on finances. You've made that a mission to try to overcome this and these gaps, right?
Yeah, but when Bank of America asked women, how do you identify financial stability or financial security? 47% said being debt-free.
Yeah.
34% said being able to pay my bills without asking for my family to help. Yikes.
That's tough. Yeah. Financial independence is what we're talking about today for women. And that's, it seems like it is such well, it doesn't seem, it is a harder thing to achieve for women than it is men, just because the cards are the deck is stacked against them.
Yeah. And, this is the conversation that needs to be had. I did not want to have another podcast. Y'all can go back and listen to my other podcasts about those steps to maintaining your financial independence, and doing things like keeping your own bank account, keeping some credit that's in your name only. I don't want to rehash all of that. I didn't want to talk about all of that again today. We needed to look at some of the underlying circumstances here and to understand that for those of you listening to this, you're not alone. And that it's a conversation that needs to be had. Money is probably the most taboo subject in this country right now.
Yeah. I mean, even amongst especially amongst family members. I mean, it's what derails families at the end of life. People don't discuss their finances. It's taboo, and they don't seek out others. It's what breaks families apart after, someone passes, your mom or your dad passes, and then the kids fight, or there's no family harmony because there was never any communication with everyone together. And
this same client that came in was like, my daughters are fighting over who should be on my checking account with me now. And I said, neither of them should be on your checking account.
No.
Then it becomes an asset of theirs.
Yeah.
And it really makes the water muddy.
And if they get married and divorced, then that money could go. You don't want your house or your bank accounts in your kids' names in case they get married and divorced, or stuff like that, right? I mean,
or if there's a car accident and a lawsuit involved,
a lawsuit,
or or even sadly, I had another client, another couple. Only this time it was the wife that passed away, and she was the one that handled everything. The husband didn't handle anything.
Right.
They had one of their daughters on their checking account. So she was technically an owner of the checking account. And the day that mom passed away, daughter went and drained all but $1,000 out of the checking account. And we're having a very difficult time talking, trying to assert that this was elder abuse because she was on the account and was an owner.
Yeah. And so you got to be careful there. And I mean, there are ways around that too, but so many factors go into this. And you're right. You wanted to look at the underlying factors behind this, and the
Mhm.
statistics you're talking about are crazy, and things like that, and that goes into enhanced planning and end of life planning too,
Mhm.
because have a trust there, that stuff can be in, and that protects it from
And
some of these
durable
things. From
powers of attorney,
yes,
so that they have limited access to what's going on and only when it's necessary. Um, the great part about our generational vault is that for the parents that want their kids involved in the finances, you can actually give your children permission to be in your generational vault, but you can also restrict which folders they're allowed to see. So maybe you want them to have access to the legal folder with the will and the trust and the powers of attorney and all of that, but maybe you're not quite ready to show them the whole financial picture.
right,
They don't necessarily have to have access to the financial side of things, but you can give them access to the paperwork. And, as advisors, we end up, I tell all of my clients, they're like, what if something happens to me? And I'm like, me being them. And I'm like, you tell your kids to do three things: four things: call the undertaker, call the pastor, call me, and call the estate planning attorney. Pretty much in that order.
yeah,
So, you know, but as women, my generation, my mom's generation to an extent was the one that fought for that liberation and did a lot to change the culture. My generation is probably one of the first that has been able to assert that independence a little bit more. Although there are still plenty of people my age and younger, plenty of women my age and younger, that when it came time to have family, we took the time off. We stayed at home with the kids.
right.
And I wouldn't trade that time I had with my girls for anything,
Oh
ever,
yeah,
ever. But it did make a difference in how I was preparing for retirement. And it made a difference in how much I could save at that time. It was one of those situations where, if I weren't in the industry that I am in, and if I didn't have the opportunities that I have with what I do, my future could look very different than it does. Being self employed and having created a company that I now run, I have a lot more. And, with the internet now and with all of the things that are available, it's much easier for somebody to be entrepreneurial and to take the reins and to take control of the ship
right.
than it ever has been in the history of our country. But that created a different scenario for me than I ever would have had if I were in a job trying to put enough into a 401k to be able to make up for those lost years.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I'm glad that you're talking about this, and
Mhm.
it should be encouraging. I mean, we're highlighting a lot of issues today, but you have to look and say, "Hey, these are the issues. This is what I'm having to deal with," and make a plan to go forward. Right?
The only time we have a problem is when we don't know what the problem is. Once we've
Right.
identified what's going on, then we can start looking for solutions.
Sure.
And when it comes to financial independence, financial security, finances in general, that's why you want to work with a fiduciary who can look at all the different components and all of the different tools that are available. And, I'm not the only fiduciary in my office. There are two other fiduciaries as well. And, we routinely have conversations about what is and isn't in the best interest of a client in given circumstances. So it's an iron sharpening iron kind of thing.
Right.
Sometimes it just looks like we're butting heads like a couple of old goats, but that's another conversation for another time. Um, Ultimately, it's about taking care of you, the client, and helping you guys set things up financially, whether you're a man or a woman. But, I have a special heart for women because of my life story and the path that I saw. And having watched my parents divorce each other twice and knowing how that impacted things, I think that women need to have a place where they can come and talk and understand that it's a judgment-free zone, and that nobody is going to shame you for the choices you made or what's been done in the past. That's in the past. We can't change that. What we do need to do is figure out what we can do moving forward to make the best outcome possible for you.
Right. Well, and so to find that safe space or have these discussions, to wrap it up, let our listeners know, Barb, I know you're more than happy to talk to them.
I am.
You have a great staff there. In fact, you just took some great shots of you and the other ladies in the office there. I love it.
Yes. And there are a couple of guys in the office too, but since we were
you're an equal opportunity employer.
I am an equal opportunity employer. But we were focusing on women and money. So we did pictures, some with the guys, some without.
Sure.
But they can reach out to us at our website, anchoryourretirement.com. Or you can always call us at area code 913-553-6222 and select the appointments and scheduling option. And a member of our team will get you connected. If they can't get you connected with me, then we'll get you set up with one of our other fiduciaries in the office, and we will help you understand, get your arms around what you've got, where you're headed, and figure out how to create that successful retirement for you, whatever that looks like in your mind.
Right. That's great, Barb. And thanks again. That website, anchoryourretirement.com. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. Viewers, thanks for watching. Barb, hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend and the following week. And the following weekend. And great show. Thanks for that. That does it for today's episode of Anchor Your Retirement with our host, Barbara Gulin.
We'll see you soon.